So I am thrilled to welcome my good friend Courtney Seard to Rebels of the Heart. Court, welcome. I'm looking forward to this conversation with you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation as well.
Yeah, there's so many different ways that we can take this conversation. So I'm excited to just see what emerges today, especially since you are a passionate advocate for the work that we're doing with LifeGuides and the work we're doing for creating cultures of belonging and for people to be fully seen and to have a voice. And also what we're doing around Rebels and how we shift the culture of business, of life, and people's well-being. And I know you have a lot of experience and expertise in this area. So I think you have a lot to share with the community. So it's really fun to have you on here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So first and foremost, I'll just say, there's a lot we can cover in your personal professional journey, but just tell us a little bit about how, the concept of being a rebel with a heart has shown up throughout the story of your life in whatever way feels called to share right now.
Yeah, I kind of feel maybe I've always been a rebel with a heart. Like as a kid, when you kind of like look back as to, I would be the person sort of standing up for people that were getting bullied or like befriending someone who didn't have any friends and kind of like skirting the line between like the popular kids, but also kind of being like, I'm an empath, right? So I could always feel it. Didn't know it then, uh, didn't have the language for it. For me, I think, I'm going to be 46. So I think I'm in that like era of I had like this analog, but also digital,
Yeah.
right? And I think in the workspace, I was always fortunate to be one of the youngest people and also pretty much the only woman and the only person of color. I found myself attracted to industries in like sports and tech and construction and finance. And they typically are male dominated. And I just kind of started like looking and advocating for myself and for other people in a professional aspect. I think I really took that on when I was working for an organization in Seattle that was ending up being acquired by Microsoft. It was called Spring Creek Group. However, I was with the two founders and we grew the business to that point. And it just became something where I was so passionate about
Yeah.
ensuring that these, young leaders, young technology was a place for everyone. And I remember having this conversation when we were kind of going through this large recruiting phase of talking about, we needed more diversity, like we need more women. And they were like, well, we have you. And, it wasn't something that was like curt, but they really were like, oh no, we didn't think about it.
Yeah.
So every conversation that I have when I generally am, if I'm speaking or if I'm consulting or coaching, a lot of the things that we think should be no brainer, people aren't thinking about it,
Yeah.
right? I like to say that you can't read the label when you're inside of the bottle. And my job is to take you out of the bottle and to help you kind of like see an overview of life. And I've also kind of always been that person to speak truth to power,
Yeah.
when it was difficult. Quite honestly, it's never been easy.
Yeah.
I can remember, moments as a kid speaking up and getting heat for it and wondering, well, why can't I keep my mouth shut? There was just recently a scenario situations where I was like, having this conversation with a friend, it might just be better for me not to speak up,
Yeah.
like why am I taking the heat for speaking up? But then realizing that that's what I'm.
That's part of who you are. So I know from our time knowing each other, I know that you speak from a place of genuine heart and passion. And that's part of like your gift is being able to do that and to do it in a really powerful way of who you are. And there's a lot that you shared that I want to dig into. But one thing in particular that is actually a word that's not come up per se on this podcast before that I think I want to dig in with you is the role of being an empath, right? There is more people talking about this concept of a culture. I do think it is in some essence a spiritual gift that people have, where it's been a life experiential gift that's been cultivated. Talk a little bit about that for you and your experience in terms of what that has allowed you to do, how you refine that skill, capability. I do think it's an essential aspect of you, but it also, I know you cultivated it with intention. And I think that's something
Absolutely.
that you do a lot around just in general, cultivating with intention, things that you want in your life and relationships and the causes that you champion. Right. So,
So, I mean, the word empath, I think for some, it's like, oh, that woo woo word, or it's such
Right.
a mushy feely word. And I think one thing that you know about me as well, I like to always link things back to science.
Yeah.
And when you think about who we are as people, we are antennas, right? We're energetic beings. 55% of how we communicate is via our physiology. And that's body language, that's unspoken, that's energy, right? So we are antennas, we're receptive, and certain individuals have certain senses that are more heightened. I particularly can sense things in other people. For me, it was really important, I think, in my mid 20s. I started working with an incredible therapist. He was a psychotherapist and a clinical hypnotherapist. So I got, double duty. I got to talk and process, but also get some deep mental emotional work
Yeah.
that allowed me to let go of some blocks. And working with him gave me a really good understanding of, first and foremost, it's not me. I'm just sensing things, right? So understanding that just because I'm feeling something doesn't mean that they're my feelings.
Sure.
So that took a lot of work. And then also realizing that it was a superpower,
Yeah.
that it was just another way for me to communicate with people and to pick up cues, not to mind read or assume that I know something is going on,
Yeah.
but to allow me to inquire and be there and
Awesome.
have that emotional intelligence to support my team, to build that loyalty, to build that culture of caring and kindness.
Love it. So
And
two
that,
questions. I want to dig in on
yeah.
like, I think you keep going this. So 2 points. One, tactical. How have you cultivated the ability to just separate the knowledge of your emotions and energetics versus others, and be able to integrate those more fully and healthfully, right? And then the second question would be going back to cultures and what you're creating. I'll come back to that part. But
Yeah.
sure.
Well, a lot of again is intentional, right? So
Yeah.
it's first and foremost, I had to do a lot of time, not one, being disassociated, right? Coming back into my body, being in my body, allowing myself to feel, allowing myself to process. And then the next piece is questions.
Mhm.
Questions are the answer. I had an amazing teacher who would tell me to ask myself this question: who does it belong to? Is it you? And if you felt heavy, it was yours.
Yeah.
But if a sense of lightness came over you, you were sensing something else outside of the ether.
Mhm.
And a lot of times, because we are all energetic beings walking through, we are feeling things that have nothing to do with us that we take on, and we create this drama, trauma story. And a lot of it takes time, breath work, meditation, hypnosis. Um, I'm a trainer of NLP. So I think a lot of NLP really helped me heighten it. After taking my first training when I became a practitioner, I noticed that all of my senses were heightened, that I had a better understanding and a better way of being, but also a better way of differentiating. Then when I went to master prac, then trainer's trainer, and then on to like another advanced learning around NLP, it just teaches you to really hone into your mind, hone into your senses, and be intentional and tactical
Yeah.
about showing up in the world.
So thank you for giving that explanation. I think that's very helpful for people who are not as familiar with these skills. But and going back to your work and your purpose, how is that gift and that ability to tap in and experience and create a container, for lack of a better term, of people's emotions, stories, experiences, desire to belong, allowed you to create a better culture and space of belonging in the communities and organizations and missions that you have served and continue to serve?
I mean, I think because I'm tapped in, right? So when I walk into a room, I'm not just, again, in my own label. I'm allowing myself to send out those antennas to pick up the
Yeah.
receptors, right? And for me, belonging is important. So you can't deny looking at me. I'm a Black woman, right? And a lot of times diversity and inclusion hits me in different ways. But working and living in that space, I am about inclusion for all things. And
Yeah.
it's such a broad aspect, social economic. Um, you know, we can talk about your religion, we can talk about your culture, your creed. I want everyone to feel like they have a place at the
Yes.
table. It's not just about money. We can talk about studies that show diverse teams outperform non-diverse teams,
Yeah.
but it's just the fact that when people feel like they belong, they open up. And then when they open up, the creativity opens up. And when people feel as if they belong, there is a culture of understanding where you're less likely to judge someone and to not give them that benefit of the doubt. You're
Right.
more apt to realize that they're having a bad day and a bad moment and they just don't hate you. Or so I find that when you start to work with empathy,
Yeah.
it also allows you to have those conversations with individuals who can't use their words.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people don't have language for what they're feeling, right? And if you can't say it, you can't define it, and therefore you can't really solve it.
Yes.
So being able to sit there with someone and hold space with them to help them come up with the language for it,
Yeah.
or to help them um, have that light bulb moment, that care, that connection that you bring, it transforms. And I tell people that it takes a lot of time in the beginning. Yet, one, it becomes like anything, a habit, a skill. It becomes unconscious. So you do that when you connect. Like initially, when I first started this, I thought about it. I was intentional.
Mhm.
Now it's just automatic,
Yeah.
right? And the benefits just go on and on and on.
Yeah.
It starts there.
So love it. Thank you for sharing that as well. But based on um, your personal work, how have you then, I want some specific examples, translated that into the organizations in which you have been leading this work, right? So as you think about being tasked with building cultures of belonging, creating an environment of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, giving people that voice, how have you taken this personal skill that you are working to become a master at, in my opinion, and actually translated into, when I call back to Rebel of the Heart, the culture, the old culture of how we've done business? Because I do see you back to this point, and this is interesting that you started off in the beginning about talking about being the bridge between digital and analog, and you and I are that same generation, the Xennials or Zennials, whatever you want to call it, that kind of come from both parts. I believe you have an important role to play in shifting from old cultures into new cultures. And so I'd love for you to share some of the stories of how this skill and this ability has worked in actually moving organizations further to the future, right?
It's
So
exciting. Okay. So first and foremost, you need leaders who, one, believe in the importance of people. So people over profit, right? Profit is highly important. People are in business not to make money, right?
yeah,
And secondly, how I do it, a lot of it is through education and learning, and I make learning fun. So a lot of my job is content and curriculum development. I've created management training programs, middle manager training programs, and a lot of coaching. And it happens in those rooms, right? Where you start to talk about, again, I am a nerd. So I talk about the brain. I talk about, the science behind how we are as people and understanding that leadership begins within. Okay. Then I move on to giving a lot of, I would say, experiential or training where lots of breakouts, right? And role playing. Listen, a concept in the head is a concept in the head. But if you can't feel it in the heart, if you can't have that experience, change doesn't happen.
yeah,
And I've noticed that the shifts happen in those role playing moments, in those simulations, in those tough conversations. And a lot of it is also, again, just allowing people to have space. ERGs. I just left CES and I'm playing with the idea of, a lot of ERGs, they start up, they pick up steam, and then the engagement kind of dies down.
yeah,
Nothing necessarily happens, or people don't feel comfortable bringing that into the metaverse, because believe it or not, 74% of millennials say that they feel more their authentic self online than they actually do in person. So what's interesting now is corporations, we have this struggle between the way things used to be and the
yeah,
way things are going to be.
yeah,
And my job is to kind of help bridge the gap to both individuals, right? So what's interesting is working with the last organization I was at, there was this struggle between new and old, and wanting to kind of do things the old way, but then realizing that the majority of their staff being Gen Z and millennials, it wasn't working. And having to come up and be more open to things like, I would say, workshops, having people take time out. Because again, you have this younger generation who values their learning and development and company culture more than anything. So for me, it's one, kind of like coming in. I believe that training learning, education, and coaching is necessary. And it should be in an organization from the start, not in the middle, not in the end, definitely not when you have problems, but it should be a part of that foundation. So for me, a lot of the younger organization startups or founders that I talk to, it's letting them know the importance of one, you are the individual driving the ship.
Yeah.
Leadership starts at the top. The leaders must be bought in. If they're not bought in, if they haven't taken the trainings, it's not going to resonate because the younger generation, they not only can sense it and know it, they will call you out on it.
Mm-hmm.
And authenticity matters now more than ever.
Agreed. So, and this is so I love what you said about the a couple. I love a lot of what you said, but one thing that's coming to mind right now is this tension between the old and the new models of leadership, for lack of a better term. And the fact that, and you and I talked about this, there's a role that the old plays in giving birth to the new, right? And so, how do we harness and bring the lessons that are right into the future? Like to your point, we need businesses built around having a good business. There needs to be an aspect around, providing a product that is valuable, giving a fair exchange or an abundant exchange of that. There needs to be principles that people can manage, and there's certain, structural aspects, and yet still giving space or environmental opportunities within that structure for new systems and new possibilities to emerge. How I know you personally work with executives and the C-suite and board of different companies. How do you help them cultivate in their own leadership that tension? Like I personally can speak to that. I've experienced that tension. Like maybe there is value in doing it the old way because it's not a linear path, right? And so how do you work with leaders with going through that process? Because it is in many aspects a process of self-discovery and commitment on the part of that leader. It's really uncomfortable, and you're going to sit in a lot of places where you're like, I don't know the answer here. So how do you work with people, particularly because the poor habit is that when you get uncomfortable, people fall into old habits. How do we help people push through into the new habits, right?
First and foremost, is letting people know that two things can be true. Right? Like, I don't know why we're so into this polarity of black and white and this and that. No, there is nothing but different shades of gray. And it's one, allowing individuals, the fundamentals work. The fundamentals of business work. Like you need healthy profits. You need a product that is a value of a person. It needs to cross profit margins, cost of goods sold, all that matters. However, your people are going to get you there, period.
Yes.
And with a disconnect, an old way of business is the people.
Yes.
I think that if we brought the old way, the family business, that loyalty, that's what the millennials, Gen Zers, and some Gen X
yearning for. Yeah.
And I believe that we can blend it.
Yes.
When you look at some of the newer organizations that are really focused on company culture, they're getting the best talent and they're retaining the best talent. And we all know it's about retention. The largest cost that any company has everything to do with their hiring. It's all their hiring and retention. And it's a lot of hidden costs that people don't think about, Right now, I was just reading this article yesterday about like layoffs and how layoffs, a lot of the companies are doing it. It's not necessary. It's something that they look at their other companies doing it. They follow it and feel like they need to do it.
Yeah.
And when you think about laying individuals off, between the severance, the extra taxes, the time that at some point you're going to need to bring people on again, retrain them, rehire them, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
But it's just because what people are doing. I like to tell people it's time to think differently and get outside of the box. Now that's challenging. It's very challenging, especially I say if you're doing it internally inside of your organization, because you are going to be dealing with people who have more seniority. You'll be making them uncomfortable. And a lot of times people take that personally.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people say there's no such thing as, don't take business personally. It's nothing but people in business, and people take personal all the time, right? I found more success doing it on the outside. A lot of it is conversation and asking them what works for you. It's literally sitting down, brainstorming, and workshopping. What are the 5 best things that worked for you in your old business? What's missing? What's not? What should you be bringing back? What do you think, you can do to make your company move forward? You don't have to adopt all of it, but what are some of the small things that you can do? And whether you like it or not, you need to make your people happy. And it's not like they're holding you hostage, because I've heard that
Yeah.
before. It's my company, I'm the boss. No, we're in a relationship.
Right.
It's a community.
I completely agree. So here's an interesting point about happiness, right? Because part of that happiness is also an inside job. I agree. I agree. Organizations can play a big role. They have the resources to provide people education, development, containers, as we described. But it still starts with that actual individual making a choice that they also want to go along for that journey. And to your comment, I think one of the things that I have seen is that people struggle with holding this reality that multiple things are true, right? People become so stuck in their one perspective and lose focus on all the other truths that are happening in that kind of line. And so that's another area where I think there's a lot of room for people to develop and grow. And I think that frankly, that's an area where companies have not even put any real emphasis or energy yet into that. But it goes back to the layers of, like, when you think about treating disease or healing, like getting from symptoms into the root causes, like,
Yeah.
yeah. And how do we facilitate that in the context of business? Because that's the reality. I mean, I think the one thing that's been really fascinating to watch from the pandemic is to watch a collective culture say, what is the value of my time? What is the value of the limited time that we have? What's important in the culture of personal and professional and the integration of that? And I believe business has a massive opportunity to help shape and transform that in a really positive way. Like, that's, to your point, that's what people are yearning for. And I think that Zennial, millennial generation is really wanting to play a role in that shift. Right. So that's yeah, go ahead.
This shift is coming. I don't like this conversation I was having with someone else. Look at your kids. How are your kids learning? How are they processing? Look at your teenagers. Guess what? That's the future generation. So you're either going to go the way of Eastman Kodak and no longer be a company,
Yeah.
or you're going to continue to evolve like Microsoft. Microsoft is 40 something years old. They embrace every single technology change. There's no pushback. That's what people need to do, is one, learn how to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, learn how to be comfortable with ambiguity. All of these things sound super easy. They're very, very hard.
Right.
And a lot of people are going to do it. And, you've ever seen a light bulb kind of like blow out, or a fuse? That's what's happening to people right now, because there's so many different things happening at once, so many realities, so many things shifting, and people are so fixed, stiff and rigid, they're breaking. The individuals that are going to be fluid like water and understand that to develop that relationship with being uncomfortable, to develop that relationship with ambiguity, you can do it on your own. You can do it by starting a hobby that you always wanted that you're not good at. But that has to be something that you develop in yourself, especially as technology, healthcare, learning, and working changes. And I was reading an article yesterday, and I think it was either Forbes or Bloomberg, about like the workers' time is over, the recession, the layoffs, like the hybrid work and the flex pay is over. Maybe for now, but it's not over forever. And if they're banking on this staying the same forever, we as a nation are in trouble. When you look at all of the other emerging markets where they are embracing the changes in their business in regards to technology, in regards to hybrid work, in regards to healthcare, mental health care, mental days off, you've got other companies going to the 4-day work week outside of Europe. Like, it's coming or it's not.
Well, and that's what's so fascinating, to your point. I mean, I don't think that it is over. I think that in certain pockets, maybe to your point, certain companies are falling into old habits, but others are not. And then the other possibility is that you have some companies that are literally doing layoffs and hiring at the same time. And so I think that
I know, right? Make it make sense. Or as they say, the math isn't mouthing.
Right.
You're telling me that there are certain people in that organization that they can't cross train or bring over. So a lot of this, I'll be honest, has a lot to do with, cleaning house, wanting to change culture. A lot of the older organizations do want things to go back to the way they were, because they were exacting full, total control.
Yeah.
And when you watch someone gain their freedom and independence, the last thing that you want is that. So you're going to cut off the head of the individuals who may be fostering that type of environment of, I would say, advocacy for themselves and others.
But you and I both know that energy goes somewhere, right? So it's going to get just displaced somewhere else, and it's going to come back around. And so that's the whole concept of how do we work with that as opposed to against that, right? And because that's going to actually allow us to create a much more productive, healthy system for a lot more people, right? And so that's, we can do it in a constructive fashion, or we can do it in a destructive fashion. That's kind of with the whole concept of rebels of the heart, right? How do you do it in a constructive fashion? Because it's the concept that, yeah, we need to change the way, we need to break systems and do it, but to do it with a sense of care, concern, and forward looking for people having their voice and shaping that, right? That's the dichotomy of the whole concept. How do you be a rebel with heart? Because usually when you think of rebel, you're being destructive, you're fighting against the system. There's a fierceness to that, and that's true. But when you do it with a heart, you're also doing a sense of love and sense of care, with a sense of compassion and oneness, right? And moving to a common good and a common possibility, right? That's the abundant world we talk about. There's enough for everybody. How do we actually allow more people to realize that? And how do we build and design systems that reflect that, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is, one, it's in language, it is in energy, it's how you talk it. It's a lot, right? Like there will be moments where I was like, oh, but I know I have to sell this because this is the way to be. Like it's moving. It also has to take time. I think that, in some
Yes.
aspect, you and I are futurists. We're futurists in the future of work and in the future of how people can show up and be. And for me, at least, I'm like, I'm here already, and realizing, oh no, I'm not here, but I can lay the tracks for people. So
You're
for us,
here, but the culture's not here.
right. So it's about, one, being patient. It's one also, honoring where individuals are at, meeting people where they're at, using their language, right? Like I don't go into a boardroom and I would never say empathy. Like I'm an empath. I would talk about emotional intelligence. I would say empathy, but not that I'm an empath, because that doesn't work. Right. So it's being comfortable, also just shifting around. I get excited by it because this is why I was put on this planet, right? Like I know for a fact that this is my purpose. It's showing up time and time again. I tell people that in the work that I do as a coach, as a consultant,
Yeah.
as someone, first and foremost, learning and development, diversity, inclusion is not easy.
Yeah.
In the name, right? When you're learning, you're growing. Growth is hard. They call it growing pains for a reason.
Yes.
So I let people know that when you're going to work with me, right off the bat, you're going to hear feelings are going to come up. You're going to, and that's okay. Right? Like you're entitled to feel those things. You're going to feel them. I let them know ahead of time, because a lot of people think that they're the only one going through it. And I'm like, no, you're going to feel this. You're going to feel that. This is going to come up. That's going to come up. I tell a lot of my coaching clients, oh, halfway through it, you're going to hate me.
Yeah.
What? Yep. Because I'm going to push you to be the not you.
Yeah.
Company. Yeah. You're not that company yet. It's the not company.
Mm-hmm.
You're this company. And to get you there, it's going to take a lot of work. Are you really dedicated? And now those are the conversations I'm having before, because I've had engagements where it just kind of like, so now I'm having those front loaded conversations of like, you say you want it, but do you really, really want it? Are you dedicated to go through when everyone is feeling uncomfortable, when your team is actually storming because you're bringing in these new concepts, you're pushing them, when it's uncomfortable? Or are you going to want to revert back to the way it wasn't, going under the rug?
And that's an important part of leadership, in my opinion, is framing that. And I think that back to that's the whole, I mean, that's the area where that's the real opportunity, the need here for leaders of future organizations and culture. Like it is not going to be it's not going to be an easy path forward, right? There's going to be a lot of resistance and a lot of uncomfortable, personal and professional interactions that lead to that. And it needs to be given a voice early on for people to be aware to sign up for that, right? I mean, like there's a certain level of clarity that's needed to say, hey, this is going to go, we're going through the darkness together, quote unquote, in order to get to the other side. And I don't think enough leaders, in my opinion, will do that, will name that, right? And so people will sit in this kind of, well, what's going on and where do I fit? And that's part of the opportunity as well around the future of leadership. One last point, I think when I come back to it, you flagged, it was a good way to talk about, people are yearning for more purpose, I believe, in their work and in their lives. How did you go about? I mean, I always known you to be clear on your purpose. So I've been fortunate in that sense to know you in that regard. But how did you do that? What's your advice, if you will, for people who are not as clear on their purpose and are yearning for that purpose? How would you advise them to begin that journey of self-discovery or access, like, of their information to help them refine that?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I'm like sitting here thinking, like, do you have time to pull my notes? Because I work with my clients, right, with this. There's like so much you could do. If you were interested here, I would recommend a book. I can't think of the title, the author's name off the top of my head, but it's called Brave Leadership. And it's an incredible book because it's a book, but it also has like a workbook in it. And there's a lot of questions around finding your purpose within your work, which you can kind of translate into your life. I like to say, like, what are the things that bring you joy? What are the things that bring you excitement? What did you always find yourself inside of? Like, what were you always doing? Like, I've always been teaching people, I've always been kind of coaching individuals, and I've always been standing up for things. And I started my work honestly in accounting.
Yeah.
Like, I was an accountant.
Yeah.
And that wasn't my thing, right? I had to get outside of myself. You also have to be brave.
Mhm.
Like, when you're looking for what makes your heart on fire, you have to be brave. And I also say, do all the things, try them. So I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I'm a massage therapist. I'm a craniosacral therapist. They all interested me. I went to school for them. Like, when I got to clinic, I got all the way to clinic and I had to touch strangers. So it's like, yeah, I don't want to do massage. And if I'd never done it right now, I'd be sitting here like, oh my God, what if I had a career in massage? So I would say just play. Like, play is going to get you to where you need to be. And it's not so serious. I find with everything, people make things super serious. Well, guess what? When you're serious, you're not breathing. Your vagus nerve is constricted. Your vagus nerve is a center for oxygen. It's a center to send your signals to your body that you're comfortable. And it also provides creativity and thinking. So have fun with things, right? Like, all of this stuff isn't that serious, really.
That is an excellent closing remark to leave this here. Just have some more fun, to have bring more joy, to bring more play into the workplace as we figure this all out together, and we can have some fun co-creating this together. So, with that, Courtney, how can people find you, connect with you, learn more about your work, invite you to collaborate in different ways? Just share that information. We'll share that with the audience as well. But again, thank you for being here, and sharing your wisdom with all of us.
They can find me on LinkedIn. So it's Courtney A. Seard. Also, CourtneySeard.com is my website. You can email me at Courtney@CourtneySeard.com. I am a private on Instagram because that's for me. And I don't really do Twitter. I haven't in years. And I have not logged on Facebook in ages. So you can find me on those places, or you can, hit Derek up and he'll introduce us as well.
Awesome. This was great. Really fun conversation as always. Thanks, Court. And looking forward to seeing you in the future on other Rebels of the Heart opportunities.
Yay! Bye.